Hello HEMA friends and welcome to this new video. So today I want to discuss you a concept which I will say is, generally speaking, common sense. So it's something that generally speaking every one of us know, but we tend to not relate to it when it is needed. And this concept is we fight as we train. So I've heard many people saying it in my life, and it is common sense. Actually it makes sense, it's true. In any single possible way, it's something which is always true. So this concept is something that is really important. I mean, I generally speaking say to my students that really important things are obvious, generally speaking, but there are so much of them that sometimes we forget to check every point, right? So everything is obvious, but we have so much obvious things to look for and to keep in consideration that we forget about most of them sometimes. And this is a concept really important that we have to consider, especially when we organize our training, when we select the tools that we are using for training, etc. So I want to make you an example, which is something that happened to me in this month. So I recently, 4 or 5 months ago, I received from Martin Fabian his Sigi sword, the Sigi concept. Now I have another one, and in my club we started to train thrusts mainly with that kind of tool. So why? That's simple. It's the safest sword I have, and by safest I mean it's really safe. You can thrust reliably, even with the tip of the sword vertical toward the ground, perpendicular, and not flat. Like flat makes the blade flex more easily. Vertical, sometimes it's terrible. It tends to stuck and stay stiff in some sort. Now with the Sigi sword this thing is different, and I can reliably thrust in different direction with the blade positioned in different situation and dynamics. So what happened is that we started to train thrust with that kind of tool. So what this thing brings to you? So it means that you can thrust more reliably, that you are, let's say, more comfortable in doing it, and you are, let's say, more eager to speed up your actions. So you tend to get more comfortable, which means you feel, let's say, safe in doing it. While feeling safe, you start to increase your speed, to put your arms in a correct position and keep them in that position, and so your thrusting performance becomes better. So I'm actually not here to praise the sword per se, because this is not the idea behind the video, but it's just an example. This example is true for other tools and other swords too, for different things, for different motivations. I can say good things about other swords of other productors which are better for specific situation in training, etc., but also for protections. So there are some jackets which are better for different things than others. I have 2 different jackets from Spes, and both of them are good for different things. So what I am talking about, why I am talking about all these tools, this training equipment, etc., these swords. Every tool that you put into your training environment modifies a little bit the way in which you train, and so modifies the way in which you fight. Now, I actually studied it because I noticed it in myself and in my students and in my training environment over and over again. When I was training mainly with minimal equipment 5-6 years ago, when I started back to train with the full gear, I noticed that it was kind of hard for me to get into the proper mood, right? So I wasn't able to translate my motions into something, let's say, stronger or faster or whatever. It was really hard for me. So what I was doing was trying to overachieve the objective, actually. So I was overachieving it without trying to do so. So I had to force my actions. Everything was like too strong or too big or whatever, because I wasn't finding the solution between the things I already know. So I had to, let's say, create the solution on the run, on the moment. And so what happened is that my actions weren't really performing properly for that kind of situation. So this means simply that when you train in a specific way, with specific tools, with specific rules, you create a specific, again, way of fighting. And this is true for today and for the past. So when we analyze our manuals, we have to always think, how did they ended up training this action? And sometimes we can even relate to the images of the manual itself. Sometimes we can find maybe hints of how they're training. I speculate a lot on this kind of things. I did a 133 video about almost entirely about this specific topic. But generally speaking, it's important to relate to how people trained in the past and how we train now. And this is important because we have to figure out what our training environment is compared to what the training environment was in the past. What we can do better in a sense, so maybe in regards of safety, slash freedom of movement, etc. Maybe we can achieve better results with our modern equipment, modern tools, but maybe they had more experience, direct experience of fighting or whatever. So we have to organize our mind in this way, so relating the way people trained in the past to the way in which we train can help us figure out more things. So one of the things I really liked about training so much time with minimal equipment and then switching again to full gear sparring as I do now, mainly full gear sparring, is that I ended up discovering the actual difference that there is between one way of training and the other in terms of the result you put out in your fighting. You can achieve a lot of results while training with minimal equipment in terms of skills, body mechanics, exploiting angles, whatever. But it's harder to put in, let's say, more an aggressive attitude, which is something which fighting needs sometimes. So you need to be aggressive, but you can't be as aggressive as you want in that situation. So aggression, it's an important part of fighting actually. And because you have to face aggression when you're fighting, and so you have to be prepared for it. So one thing I asked me in these days is, were people fighting, training and so fighting mainly with minimal equipment, or they used some kind of tools or whatever? So it's, well, I don't say actually that I started to think this in these days, but I think about it. I ended up thinking about it many times in the past, and I still, of course, don't have an actual answer to this. But it's really interesting to compare our actual results now, so what we have seen, what I have seen, so in training in different environments with different rules, to what maybe was in the past, and we can organize our mind and say, yeah, maybe people was training this way because they had, I don't know, different tools or lesser tools in some regards, or the sword were lesser safe, the replicas, whatever. Because this may help us also figure out why certain actions are described in some ways inside of the manuals. And by doing so, we can even figure out ways to adapt these actions to our environment, our modern environment. Because we have to understand that our reality is now, right? So our training environment is today, we are training with our equipment, with our swords, etc. So we end up, even if we don't want it, we end up adapting to the situation, adapting to the tools, etc. This is good and bad at the same time. This is true for every single situation. When they added boxing gloves to boxing, boxing changed it because they adapted to it. And this is our nature, our human nature, which enters into the environment and make us go for the best solution possible into the environment. So I just wanted to briefly discuss with you these ideas, this thing. It's not something which ends up with a big revelation. I just wanted to tell you these ideas I am playing around lately, because it's useful to figure out what, at least for me, it was useful to figure out what I want now from my fencing and what I want to study also, but maybe in different ways, in different training situations. One interesting thing, for example, about training, I make the example of thrusting at the beginning of this video, is at first when I started back training with full gear, I was still using replicas in training, and if I watch my old videos, when I was thrusting, I was really slow. I mean, accelerating was not something easy to do because it wasn't that safe. Maybe like thrusting into each other at the same time, which is something you don't want to do, but sometimes happens because of just chance. It becomes really, really scary. So you, even without thinking about it, you adapt to the tools that you have in your hands. And so you create a new training environment. You don't have to put yourself into the condition of following some rules that you decided. Sometimes in your training environment, you just create the rules. They just ended up growing up by themselves because you just need something. You need to be safe enough for training because you don't want major injuries, even just because you want to keep training. So you just you don't want to get injured because, yeah, I just want to train and improve, and stopping for 2 months is not good. So because of these things, you just create rules around your training environment, around the tools that you prefer. And many things are connected to this. The aesthetical pleasing that you have for your sword. Maybe you want a sword which is more sword than feather, so you go for it. But this means that it's less safe for something. And so you adapt, you just say, yeah, maybe we can just go a little bit easier with that action or this action or whatever. So there is lesser aggression, more aggression on one environment or the other. The fencing is more clean, lesser clean. Thrusting is faster or slower. You have to stop your cuts at the end because you're training with a really soft padded jacket or whatever. So every one of these things ended up creating your training environment. So when you start training, and when you keep training, and when you evolve through your fencing, and you decide to go for that jacket or that sword or whatever, or you create your sparring environment and you just dictate some kind of rules, always think about the outcome. Try to figure out the outcome. Watch other people on the tube, how they are training, how they fence. Is that fencing my objective? How they are training to achieve that objective. Maybe ask some people, maybe ask the correct question, try to figure out the correct question and then ask for them. And you will eventually figure out the way in which you want to train to achieve your goal and find out the way of fencing that you prefer. So that's just some reasoning that I wanted to have with you. I just wanted to discuss this topic because I think it's really important, and it can help many people figure out what they want and how to achieve this thing. So, very good, people. I hope you enjoyed this little chat, let's call it, monologue. And yeah, as always, thanks for watching. Remember that if you want to support me, you can just drop a sub on my channel, which is really appreciated as always. Or if you want to support me even more, just check my Patreon page, link in the description. And as always, see you next time.